All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm just going to do little introductions in the beginning. So if other people join and miss it, it's no big deal. So today we're just going to look at some ways that we can collect data during our group counseling sessions. I know that this has, for me, been a big pain point in the past. I know a lot of people mention sometimes that this is something that's difficult for them. So I just wanted to show you some really easy ways to do it. But before we do that, I'll just introduce myself in case we haven't met before. I'm Keri. I am a school counselor at a K-6 public school on the beautiful island of Oahu. It's so pretty. The beach is right across the street from my school. Some of our grades had end of the year parties at the beach and we just walked over, and I sometimes have to like kind of pinch myself and be like, wow, I can't believe this is real life sometimes. Because I grew up in Georgia in the mountains where we were not close to the beach at all. I am also a children's book author. I have a couple of parenting books that are out now, and I write curriculum for school counselors. And I'm a grad student. I'm working on my doctorate. I'm so close to being done. I'm getting ready to start the research for my dissertation, and I'm hoping I will be done by the end of this upcoming school year. So I would love to have that off of my plate, but I am really enjoying it. So that's me. Oh, and that's my girl Genevieve. You guys have probably seen her before. You might hear her or see her. She might pop up over my shoulder. She had surgery a couple days ago. She's totally fine, but she has a cone around her neck, so she's staying pretty close to me. Okay, so by the end of today, what I would love for you guys to have is just be aware of some of the types of data measures that we're looking at during group. So like during the group session, what kind of things are we collecting? Some methods of measuring these types of things, really simple ways, and then easy ways to not just measure, but also like gather your data and keep track of it as you're moving forward. Because we can collect data and be aware of it, but if we don't like track it and look at it later, it's kind of not useful information to us later. So I also have a couple of things that I will email to you guys after this. You'll see them in the session today, and then I'll send them out later. So these types of handouts will be in your inbox later, but those are some of the things that we will use. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys to do a quick survey for me. So I'm going to put this link in the chat. I think it'll just be easier if you can click it. It's just a 3-question survey. You might have to copy and paste that and put it into your browser. Let me see. I might be able to just share it with you a different way. Here we go. Make it a little easier so you don't have to type it. This will be our long link. There we go. Okay, and if you guys, I'm just going to say this for the people who are watching the recording. You guys who are watching the recording later, you can just type this link directly into your browser and still take the survey. So you don't have to be doing it live to do that, but it's bit.ly/data exercise1. So I'll give you a second to do that. And while you're doing that, I just want to offer full disclosure. My 5-year-old woke up at midnight last night, convinced that it was morning, convinced that it was time to be awake. So I'm running on very little sleep, but as you can see, I got coffee this morning, so I'm hoping to perk up. And if I misspeak, that's probably why. Also, I will say the responses you're giving to these survey questions, I'm not going to be sharing them with anybody or showing anybody what you said, so don't worry about that. When you're finished with that and you come back over, if you could in the chat, just share an emoji of how you're feeling right now about collecting data during groups. Just when you think about it, is it like, this is the worst thing, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm kind of got it, not sure, or if it's something that you're super confident with. You can use these like colored hearts. If you're in the chat box, you'll see like the little smiley face, you can click that, and then I think you have to click the shamrock at the top, and then there are colored hearts up there that you can use, or you can just type your response if you want to. That's totally fine too. Awesome, Christina found the emojis. when we were doing full virtual school, I had everything in Zoom totally down. I knew where everything was, but then I feel like things changed or I got out of the habit. And now I feel like I'm having to search for things over and over again. And Christina, you have the yellow heart, somewhat confident. I feel like that's where most of us are. Like we know what to do and what to look for, but it's just kind of like that next step. Because for me, I don't know about you, but sometimes groups can just be, you can have like a perfect plan and know exactly what you want to do, and then chaos ensues or something comes up, and that data piece is sometimes the thing that gets left behind. Okay, if you guys are still wrapping up on the survey, that's totally fine. I'm just going to offer some encouragement. You guys are in the right place. If you are doing group counseling in school setting, you want to have more of a solid plan going into the next school year, especially if you want to be more data driven in your groups and in your practice, and use that data that you collect during your groups to help you shape better sessions, shape more effective interventions for your students. And also, if you just want to have some meaningful ways to collect data and look at that kind of stuff with your students. And like I said, I totally get it. I love doing group counseling. It's probably my favorite part of my job. I just like to have that more intimate setting, providing interventions specifically for the students who need them. And I get it. Like sometimes students are late for group, or you don't have time, or teachers forget, or they're in the middle of something in the classroom. And by the time you all get there, you have lost 10 minutes of your group and you're trying to rush through it. And sometimes that data piece is just like the one that falls through the cracks, just collecting something in there, especially when you're trying to like find some sort of balance between everything, your lessons, your individuals, your groups. And also it's like we know these things, we know that we should be collecting data, but just like actually having the tools to do it is sometimes the thing that gets left out of the plan. So we are going to be looking at some ways that we can plan and deliver and analyze that stuff with ease, just with very simple steps. So we'll kind of dive right into that right now, but I just want to give a quick refresher. And this is not me like talking down to anybody. I know that you guys know these things, but sometimes in the summer, I just turn off my school brain totally. And I forget, I'm like, I don't even remember what I do. So I'm just going to give a quick refresher of the data that we're looking at during our group sessions. So our perception data, those are the knowledge, attitudes, and skills that we're measuring for our students. So just a little quick refresher, perception data, knowledge that we're looking at. We just want to know, like, what have our students learned as a result of group? What knowledge do they have as a result of our session? If we're looking at attitudes, we want to know how our students feel as a result of group, or how have their feelings changed as a result of our interventions or our instruction or the activities that they've done in the group session. And then lastly, what skills do they have? So what can they do now that we've taught them something in group? What can they do? What can they do differently? What can they demonstrate for you now that they've been in this session, they've received this instruction, they've practiced this stuff? So that's what we're looking at measuring in our session, our perception data of knowledge, attitudes, and skills. So a lot of times when we assess this perception data, we're using some sort of like pre-post survey. And I know a lot of us are really comfortable doing this before group and after group, before all of the sessions and at the end of all of the sessions. And I do that as well, but we can also do this during our sessions just to get a better read of like how each individual session is going. So I want to just give some quick points that we might be looking at when it comes to perception data. So maybe we're doing a group on coping strategies, or just calming strategies that our students can use. So we might be doing some sort of pre and post test to just assess their awareness of coping skills. So like, what kind of skills do they know about already? So maybe our goal is that after completing the group, so group as a whole, 90% of the students show an increase in awareness of positive coping strategies. So we might do just a simple pre-post like, hey, what positive coping strategies do you know? Write them all down at the beginning and then at the end and measure that. That's a really simple way to do it. We might do a pre-post measure about attitudes when it comes to an attendance group. So after completing this group, 85% of students showed positive change in attitudes about attendance. So maybe we're offering incentives for being in school. We're helping them feel more connected to the school and the school community through the group. So again, this is like a pre-post before and after the total group, not the session necessarily. We might be doing social skills group focusing on socially appropriate behavior. So a pre and post measure to understand that. And then maybe after completing the group, 80% of students showed improvements in demonstrating socially appropriate behavior. So this demonstrating the behavior, that's the skill that they've received as the group. So this one, awareness, that's a knowledge that we're assessing. What knowledge that they have of coping skills. Attitudes, of course, is attitudes. And then demonstrating a socially appropriate behavior, that would be the skill that they can demonstrate. So I'm going to look at 3 specific examples of groups that and ways that we could assess within individual sessions. So the first one we're going to look at is a social skills group. So maybe the skill that we're focusing on in this particular session is using a social filter. So the way that we could do this is give students 10 statements and just ask them to circle or highlight or figure out, identify, whatever, the 5 of the 10 statements that are okay to say to other people. So that's just giving them statements, asking them to pull out the ones that are. And since we're using numbers, right, that's easy data to collect. And I'll show you how I would record that in just a moment. So that would be just their knowledge of the statements, right? And maybe the second piece, we want to add an extra layer, take the 5 statements of these 10 that were not okay to say, and then rewrite them to be something that is socially appropriate or a better way to say what it is. So remember, when we're collecting data on skills, we're trying to figure out what can they do as a result of the instruction. So the second part is the skill, right? So this first part is knowledge. Do you know which of these are appropriate or inappropriate? And then this is a skill. Can you think of a better way to say this, right? So we're measuring a skill with that second part right there. So this is how I would record it, because there were statements, there are numbers. This one's easy, right? So identify socially appropriate statements. We've got our students' names over here, and I'm just writing this in a chart. And this is going to come up again later. So we can see right here, Amaya and Louie totally on it. They were able to find those 5 that were okay to say. Kainalu and Bex just missed one. So 4 out of 5, pretty good. But that's the knowledge part. And then this is the skill part. So could they take those socially inappropriate statements and turn them into something more appropriate? Louie was totally on it. Bex and Amaya did pretty well. Kainalu, 3 out of 5. Now, I think it's really important to say, especially at this point, when we're just writing down these numbers, we're writing down, he got 4 out of 5, he got 5 out of 5, 3 out of 5, and that's it. That is data that we can look at for sure. But you guys all know, I know our students are not just data points, they're not just numbers. So I have a chart like this that I use in my sessions just to write that down, just to see how they did. But then I also include a narrative with this, just to kind of describe how it went. Were there specific statements that were difficult for them? And I'll show you actually how I write out the narrative a little bit later. I want to go through all 3 examples first, but I just think it's important to note that I always include narrative information when I'm collecting data too, just because this isn't a whole picture of what happened in the session. This is just what they were able to do, but were there other factors? Were there distractions? Did he come in and say he didn't have breakfast this morning? Those types of things. I like to include that as well, because that's all important information that like paints a full picture when we're collecting this kind of data. So for my second example, we're going to look at a test anxiety group. So we're measuring attitudes with this one, just their feelings about the test. Maybe you have standardized testing coming up and you want to help your students with that. So our measure might be how are they feeling prior to our group session and how they're feeling after our group session. So again, remember, we're collecting attitude data. It's just how are they feeling as a result of the instruction that we offered or the intervention that we offered, it's skills that we practice. So maybe in this group, we're showing them an example of what the test might look like, giving them some sample questions and letting them practice those types of things. Maybe we are practicing some positive self-talk. Maybe we are doing some calming strategies or practicing things that they can do in the moment to help them during the group test. So really this measure that I'm going to show you, you could use in a variety of session. So if you're doing a test anxiety group, you might actually use this measure every single session just to see how it's going along the way. So this is what I do. I just make like a little clip card. Hopefully our pictures will come back. There they go. So the students can just write their name in right here. Kaimana feels, so got like ready and confident, a bit nervous, but okay, pretty nervous, totally overwhelmed. So I just give them a card that looks like this and a clothespin and they clip it. That's data, right? They've given me a data point. And if you want to apply a numerical value to it, easy enough. This can be 4, 3, 2, and 1, right? And then we can write that down and have a numerical data set to help compare. So maybe before the session, I'll have them just show me with their clip, like, how are you feeling about the upcoming test? We do our interventions, we do our instruction, we do all of that, our practice skills. At the end of the session, I ask them to do the exact same thing. They clip it. That's our data for the session. Like it's just such an easy way. And it's probably something that we're already doing, right? You probably use tools like this all the time, but just writing down the numbers or writing down how they correspond can really help us actually have data that we've collected to say like, hey, this is how they were feeling before the session. These are the interventions that I did. These are the activities that we did. And this is how they were feeling afterwards. So what I did was effective, right? And you can show that to teachers, administrators, parents, whatever, whoever you are presenting your information to. Okay, I just saw something flash at the top of my screen that said somebody had their hand up, but I didn't see the name. So if you want to put questions in the chat box, that's totally fine. I have it up and I can see that. So I can answer those as they come up. I'm going to click to the next slide, but if I'm going to keep my eye over there for questions just in case. But anytime you have a question, please feel free to just put it in there and I will keep an eye on it. So for my third group example, this would be for an anger group. So this would be a knowledge question. We're assessing knowledge about anger triggers and calming strategies. So it's two separate things, two things we're measuring. First, can they identify things or experiences or people, situations, whatever, that trigger their angry feelings? And then second, what is their ability to identify helping calming strategies? So the things that I'm going to show you for this are pages from a workbook that I use, but it's really simple to use these as data collection tools too. So this, again, knowledge, we're just wanting to know, what do the students know as a result of our group instruction? So maybe we're doing some sort of instruction on what is a trigger, what types of things trigger anger, or maybe we are doing instruction on helpful versus unhelpful calming strategies. So this is a page that I use for my workbook. And it's just, what is an anger trigger? So there's a little bit of psychoeducation about what is a trigger. And then I kind of just say like things that push your buttons. That's the term that I use. So then I have these little buttons down here. I'm just asking them to write 3 things that push their buttons or things that might trigger their anger. Now, I think it's important to note for this one, when we're collecting data on something like this, an anger trigger, it's not like a 5 out of 10 or a 3 out of 5 situation. Like, can they identify 5 anger triggers? Maybe they don't have 5, maybe they only have 1 or 2, and that's okay. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So when we're collecting data on something like this, it's a yes or no. Like, can they identify anger triggers or can they not? So that is a little bit of a complicated piece to this one, just because it isn't a one size fits all, but that's okay. I'm going to show you another thing that I use to assess this as well. So this page is just like, can they identify it or not? Write those down. Now this one helps, I think, a lot with my students who aren't quite there to being, they don't have the self-reflection just yet to figure out what's going on. This is just offering some examples of common anger triggers, and they're checking off like, is this true for me or not? So again, this is just going back to that first measure. Do they have the ability to identify things or experiences that trigger my angry feelings? Now, if you're giving them this whole list of things like when I have to wait, when I'm ignored, when I'm left out, those types of things, and they're like, none of these things are true for me. I'm only angry when Kaimana says mean things to me, or like it's all Kaimana's fault and they're just blaming one person. That would give me some insight on they're not like self-reflecting to know like what kinds of situations or things like that are triggering anger, if it's kind of like a blame situation, right? But this is just some helpful information they can use, like a checklist where they're able to identify some things. Now, the second piece of that, I said we we're going to look at, can they identify helpful calming strategies? This is just another page from that same workbook. It's called like helping myself cool down. It's all like ice cream themed. So that's why it looks like this. So this is about helpful versus unhelpful strategies. So this one is something we can place a numerical value on because they're being given 12 situations, and I think 7 of them are positive. So we're just asking them to circle the ones that are helpful strategies for dealing with anger. So like 7 out of 12, 6 out of 12, something like that. We could place a numerical value on that and use a form like this where we're just giving a data point for that. So those are the 3 like individual session examples that I have for you, but I want to show you the forms that we have. So this is the one that you saw earlier. So these are the ones that I'm going to send out. So you don't have to like take a screenshot or anything. I'll email you the form. I just write in like which group I'm doing, what session it is, what my instructional goal is, what I'm teaching them, what I hope that they'll get out of the session. I have their names over here, and then I have student knows, feels, or can, and then I'm just operationalizing what I want them to be able to do at the end of the session. And then in these boxes, I can just say like 3 out of 5, 5 out of 5, yes or no, that type of thing. And if I do have 2 measures, I have a chart that has 2 of these. So I want to show you this with the narrative piece. So I'm going to stop this screen share for just a second and show you a different one. Here we go. switching over to PowerPoint. I make all of my forms in PowerPoint just because I think it's easier. Okay, so that's what I just showed you. Now, this is what my example might look like. So my anxiety group with my fourth graders, this might be session 5. So my goal in this session, I taught students how to question and evaluate worries. They practiced looking for evidence to disprove worries and identified most likely situations. So I've got my goal right here. Students can list at least one piece of evidence to disprove 5 given worry statements. I'm giving them 5 statements and I want them to name, they can say it out loud, write it on a whiteboard, whatever, pieces of evidence to disprove it. So can they do at least one piece of evidence for each statement? So you can see I've got Genevieve, James, Daniel, they had 5 out of 5, great job. Benny and Finley, 4 out of 5, pretty great. Mariah was only able to do it for 2 out of 5. Now, we want to know what else is going on. What other context can we provide to inform this data that we collected? So overall, students did well with this activity. M struggled to identify evidence to disprove the worry statements and instead generated more worry statements in 3 of the opportunities. I plan to conduct a follow-up individual session with M to reteach this concept. B and F did well, but struggled with the worry statements related to family situations. Both are currently dealing with family changes, so this may be related. So it's just an opportunity to offer like a more full picture to the data that I've collected. So I've noted that Mariah didn't really do well. She really struggled with this and was just coming up with more worries instead of evidence to disprove the ones that I had given her. So this might be an opportunity for me to pull her in for an individual session, try to reteach this and go over it with her more one-on-one. Maybe she didn't get it in the first session. She needs to see it in a different way, and that's okay. That's what we want to know in our session. So when we're only collecting data before the group and after the group, that is great information, but we're only getting information about the group as a whole. But when we're collecting data before and after each individual session, we're seeing where the breakdown might be. So maybe in our overall data pre-post for the whole group, we see that Mariah did okay, but that doesn't really tell us where she struggled within the group. So this is why I think it's so important to collect this data each session, right? So we saw that this particular skill she really struggled with. Maybe she did really well with the other sessions, but this skill really hung her up. So we need to reteach her how to question worries and things like that. Now, I also think it's really important. These two, Benny and Finley, they both struggled with statements that were related to family situations, but we know because we know them and they're whole people that aren't just defined by numbers, that that's something that might be a struggle for them because of things that are going on outside of the group and at home. So it's just good information to have. Okay, so I'll show you this other example down here. So this is a conflict resolution group. I do this every year, multiple times a year. It's one of the things I know it's so important, but I really don't enjoy doing this one particular group because it's always, I don't like the fighting, you know what I mean? But I know it's important, they need these skills. So in this session, my goal is to teach students about win-win solutions. So this has 2 instructional goals. So students know what a win-win solution is. That's part 1, yes or no, do they know? And they can generate win-win solutions for 4 given scenarios. So you see in this column, I've just checked it. Can they define it? So maybe we do a pretest at the beginning of our session and just ask them to write down on a sticky note, what is a win-win solution? Can you do it? Do you know what it is? If they don't know at the beginning, but they do at the end, great. They've learned something. They have knowledge. We can assess that they have gained from our instruction. So you can see everyone but Daniel was able to define what a win-win solution is. Now we look at the second part. Can they generate win-win solutions for 4 given scenarios? Looks like everybody did pretty well. James got 3 out of 4. Daniel's only 2 out of 4, but if he doesn't know what a win-win solution is, it's going to be pretty hard for him to generate win-win solutions for scenarios. Mariah did pretty well, 3 out of 4. So our narrative for this one, overall students did well. D was not able to define win-win solutions in the post-test. He also had difficulty generating win-win solutions to the given scenarios. I plan to see him individually to reteach the concept. The scenarios he struggled with were related to recess issues. So I will also be present during recess to offer in the moment coaching on this concept. So maybe he got 2, he did great coming up with win-win solutions for things in the classroom or things at home with friends. But when it comes to recess situations, it was like, nope, can't do it. He wasn't able to get there. So he might need some more like present in the moment coaching with that. So being out there at recess with him, it's just giving me an idea for how to help this particular student grasp the concept. So, and I don't want to say this over and over again, because I am sure that you guys understand what I'm saying, but just collecting this data in the one for each individual session really offers us so much more information about where our students are missing skills and where we can fill in the gaps, because we don't want to deliver our group and do all this data collection at the beginning and data collection at the end, but then not know like where the gaps are in between, right? Because this is really offering us solution-oriented information. So we see, okay, struggled with the recess stuff. I'm going to offer him extra instruction during recess specifically, right? It just helps us be more responsive to our students' needs. Okay, I'm going to switch back over to my slides. Remember, if you have questions anytime, please put them in the chat and I will be happy to stop and answer those. Okay, so those are the forms. Oh, I have one more that I'll show you too. So when you are collecting knowledge information, knowledge data, maybe you want to say like, name 3 positive coping strategies, something like that. I have this form for you guys that you can use where you can add your own question up here at the top and then they can just fill it in at the bottom. A lot of times when I am doing these knowledge assessments in our sessions, I will give students the opportunity to write, but if I do have students who struggle in this area, I might just have them hang back after group and just have them verbally tell me their answers and I'll write it for them. So that's no big deal. And then I'll send you guys this form as well, so that you can have it. But I also want to show you some helpful online tools. So I don't do that just yet. I work at a school where before COVID, we were not one-to-one with devices, but we were able to provide all of our students devices through a grant during COVID. So I don't have my students bring their devices to group counseling often, actually almost never. I've only done it a few times. I use them most often in classroom lessons as an assessment tool to use these online tools, but you can use them during group and there are some really helpful things that we can do. So I'm going to stop this share and I'm going to switch over to a different screen for us. And I want to show you one of my favorite tools. It is Mentimeter. If you guys follow me on Instagram, I talk about it all the time. So you might already know about it, but if you don't, it's a really cool tool. So I'm going to ask you guys right now on your device to go to this website right here, menti.com. It's menti.com. And it's going to ask you for a code. And let's see, I'm just going to refresh real quick because I don't know if that code is still active. So go ahead and go to the website and I will get the code for us. I think it might be, I made this a while ago. Okay, here we go. So here's our code, 56937180. And I will put this in our chat box too. So this is the website, menti.com, and the code is 56937180. You don't have to put the space, you can though. So it's going to, you'll actually see the results live here on my screen as you guys are responding. So which coping strategy can you use to calm your heart rate? So of course you guys know the answer. I am going to do it on my phone as well. So this is a great assessment tool for groups as a whole. So when I say that, I mean, you're not going to get individual data from each individual student, because as you noticed, this question, it did not ask you for your name. You didn't have to log in. So when I see this, I'm not seeing who's answering what. So I just submitted my answer. I said jumping jacks. So that's me that popped up over there. So when you see this, if you're using it with a group, it's not telling you Keri said jumping jacks, but everybody else said deep breathing. It's not saying Keri didn't know the answer, right? But you can assess your group as a whole, like how did they gather the information? So when I share this website, I will just share it with the caveat that for some of these types of questions, you won't get information on individual students. But if everybody's saying jumping jacks, everybody's saying push a wall, you know they didn't get the concept, right? That is just with this one. So this is a multiple choice bar graph. I'll show you a couple of other ones. There is one tool that you can use to get individual data. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this next question. Okay, I think I have to switch to a presenter screen for now. Okay. So you guys should be able to go to the next question now. So this is about test day. So you'll see it's kind of a slider for each one of these. And if you're using a phone, you can just slide it with your finger or iPad. But if you're on a computer, you have to drag it with your mouse. So I feel confident that I can be present and on time on test day, read and understand the test, calm my body and mind during the test. You'll see it's got 5 points on here for the scale. So you can just kind of slide and you see how it pops up and it moves around to show you how it's going. And if you have a smartboard in your room, I don't, I wish that I did. I'm in a tiny closet right now, but the students really like to see what comes up with these types of things, right? So they like to see where everybody is. And because this is anonymous, they feel more comfortable to kind of be honest about how they're feeling, right? And it's also a little bit normalizing for them too, to see like, oh, other people are really worried about the test, or other people aren't feeling that great about it right now. So you could do this as a pre-test and a post-test just to have whole group data. Again, it's not going to show you individual students, but I really like this one just because it shows a nice picture that they can see and kind of compare how they are with the rest of the group. So I'm going to go to the next question, I hope. Here we go. Okay, so now this one is going to ask you to actually type in, and so you can ask your students to include their name with their response on this one. So this one you can actually get individual data from your students. And what strategies can you use to help yourself feel less worried? And you just type your answer in the box, and then you can include your just like first name or your initials, whatever you want to do. I'm going to respond on my phone too. So as you can see, they start to pop up, and we've got names or initials in there too, right? So you can actually get data from individual students with this tool. So Menti is a really cool tool for assessing students and having like an interactive PowerPoint experience. I say PowerPoint as like a all-encompassing term, but I really like this one because they get to kind of see the results in real time as they're popping up on the screen too. So that is one. Now, if you want to use Menti, the website that you're going to use as the instructor is actually called mentimeter.com. Your students go to menti.com though. I am going to, okay, sorry, I had to mute for a second. I didn't want you guys to be subjected to me coughing. Okay, I'm gonna switch back to my other screen for now. So that was one of our online tools. Let's see, oh, wrong one. Here we go. Okay, can you guys see the blue helpful online tools presentation slide now? If anybody could just tell me in the chat, are we back on the right screen? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so the first one was Menti, like we just looked at Mentimeter. The other one, Google Forms, so easy to use. If you guys are already using Google Forms with your students, can you just tell me in the chat? If not, it's totally okay. But the reason that I really like to use Google Forms is because all of the yes, awesome. I'm glad you're using it. All of the responses that your students give can be collected in a Google Sheets form, which it just makes it so much easier to just like highlight data and create a graph, right? You can just do it on your own. You don't have to like use any other tools to make your data. So at this point, I'm going to ask you guys to do another survey for me. And I really appreciate that you guys are interacting and doing these things. So this one is similar to that first one, but it's a different website. And I will post the long link if you don't want to type it in. So you're just going to see those same 3 questions from before. You guys can fill it. If you didn't do the first one, that's okay. You can do the second one. It looks like this, just first name, last initial. First question, what is perception data? Second question, rate your confidence in collecting data during group sessions. And what perception data might you collect for a group focusing on anxiety management? Now, I'm gonna keep talking a little bit. If my talking is distracting you while you're filling out the survey, feel free to mute for just a second. That I will not be offended at all. You can see from this though, what I've done with this Google form that we filled out at the beginning and right now is I've assessed all 3 types of perception data, right? So we have perception data measures, which of these 3 things is perception data? That's a knowledge assessment, right? Do you know what perception data is? Rate your confidence in collecting data during groups. That is an attitudes assessment. How are you feeling about collecting data? And then what perception data might you collect for a group focusing on anxiety management? That's the skill. So I'm asking you to tell me like what you might actually measure during an anxiety management session. Can you take that information and turn it into a skill? So those are all 3 perception data that I'm using to assess. I'm using this Google form before and after the webinar, before and after our session in a group. So it's so simple and it's all going to be in a Google Sheets form for me to look at afterwards. So I can say like, hey, where was the breakdown? What did I not cover well enough or anything like that? So that's what that looks like. And I'll give you a second to do that. So what I hope that you gathered from this is so important to assess data before and after group, of course, but it's really easy to do it in our sessions as well, just to figure out, did they get this one skill that I was teaching during the session? Do I need to reteach this? Do I need to follow up with any individual students? Was there a particular area where they really struggled applying this skill? Was it at recess? Was it in the classroom? Anything like that. So we can know where the breakdown is, if there is one, or maybe it shows us there is no breakdown. They got it and our instruction was awesome, which hopefully is what's happening most of the time. But we know that there are always going to be times when our students or one student doesn't necessarily get the instruction, and that's okay. We're going to follow up, meet their needs, and reteach it in a different way for them. Okay, so I'm going to ask again, if you finish that Google form, if you could just drop a heart emoji in the chat about how you're feeling when it comes to collecting data during groups. Again, if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to put them into the chat box for me, and I will be happy to take time now to answer those. Okay, so this little like mini webinar is just kind of a small piece of what I offer in my group counseling course that I have. So it's all about taking your group counseling planning process step by step from like the very beginning, like assessing school-wide data, figuring out where there are needs, what types of school-wide data to look at, what to even do with the information that you have from school-wide data, or if your school isn't in a position right now where you are collecting that information, like how to do it pretty easily to get yourself started to figure out where there are gaps for your students and where group counseling or tier 2 intervention might be needed. And so that's the group counseling game plan. It's a step-by-step planning guide. I take you, it's 20 steps, which I know sounds like a lot, but it's really broken down into like the tiniest little steps to make sure that everything happens in order, but effectively to make it feel more manageable and less chaotic when you're planning for group counseling. So it's the only course that's out there that walks you through like planning, delivering, evaluating your group from start to finish, and gives you like all the tools that you need to do it. So it's all the templates, all of the forms that you might need to, you can transform them to use with your own students, your own school. They're all editable, so you can do all of that kind of stuff. So inside the course, we break down every part of group counseling and manageable action steps. We figure out how to effectively plan for groups. So what do you do with that data that you collect? How do you figure out what skills your students are missing? It's then like figuring out what skills they're missing and then matching data driven interventions to all of those skills that they are missing. And then we talk about how to evaluate your group. So things like this, things you can do in session, things that you can do for your whole group to evaluate how it went, and figure out what to do with that data, how to share it with other people, figure out what you need to do to follow up if students are missing key bits of information through the session. So there are 5 modules in the whole course. So there's a planning module, delivering your group, reflecting after the group, and then troubleshooting. So some of those things that pop up, like when you have one student who monopolizes all the group time, or you have a student who is kind of detracting from the learning for other students, what to do in those types of situations by troubleshooting. And then I walk you through a whole step-by-step example. So I take school-wide data, I walk through it, I highlight and show you like how to figure out what's missing, how to figure out what skills are missing, match interventions to that, plan sessions for all of that. So that's the 5th module is like an hour-and-a-half long training video of like how I walk through every single piece of it. And all of this is, if you were going to quantify it, it's like because of how many hours are into it, it's like a 7-hour course, like an all-day training, like a $300 course, but it comes with all kinds of bonuses for you guys. So we do webinars where you guys can come and like bring your questions about the data you have at your school, or you can come and you can say, hey, these are the skills that my students are missing. I have no idea what interventions to do for them, or these are the skills they're missing. This is what I've tried. It didn't work. What else should I teach them in group? And we can like brainstorm and troubleshoot together through that, which is really fun. I love doing that last year. We do those webinars live, but I do record them in case you're not able to come. Also in the course, you get 10 activity templates, things that you can do for your group, like these clip cards for figuring out how they're feeling. This is an assessment tool, right? We just talked about that. These are things that students can do throughout the week to progress monitor like this and track the skills that they learned in your group to kind of keep it fresh in their mind between sessions. And then everybody in the group also gets a $10 gift card for materials that you can use in group. So it's the course plus all of those things. And I know that we're all counselors. A lot of us don't have budgets for our departments, which is a whole separate issue. But I broke it down because I know that, the 147 price tag, it might be a lot for people, especially during the summer. So there's also a payment plan where you can break it down into 4 months. But this is kind of what it looks like in the course when you log in. There's an introduction, and then there's videos and modules under every single session, and every single module in every single section has downloads attached to it. So you can download everything all at once and then go through the course, or you can do it one video at a time and just download the materials as you need, whatever you want to do, whatever is most effective for you, that's totally fine. And if you are interested in joining the course, this is the link for that. I can add it over here in the chat too. This is one that you will have to just copy and paste into your browser. But it's a lot of fun, honestly, for me. You guys know I love group counseling, but actually being able to work with other counselors and hear like, oh, this is how it's set up at my school. This really works well for us, but this is not working so well. And having other people be able to say like, hey, well, this is what we do at our school. It's just really cool to see all of the collaboration and how everybody's walking through the steps together. I really enjoyed that last summer when we did it. So that is the group counseling game plan. I think for me, the most fun part of it is the webinars where we all get together and people ask questions and we, I answer, but I also I will never say I am the guru of all of these things. I want other people to offer their experiences too. And I think that's a really fun part of it where we all get to kind of collaborate across the world, because we have people who are coming from outside of the United States, all over the United States. And it's really cool to just come together and work through all of that in the group counseling game plan. So if that's something that you're interested in, I put the link there. I can email it to you when I send out the forms from today, the data tracking forms. I'll add the link in there for you guys as well. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for participating. I really appreciate that. I know that sometimes when we have like faculty meetings and there's some sort of participation, it's not people's favorite, but I hope this was a kind of non-threatening way to participate and try out some of these tools that are really helpful for assessing how our students are doing with their knowledge and attitudes and skills during our group sessions. So thank you so much for participating, and I will send you guys these forms in a little bit. If we are not connected online just yet, this is where you can find me at all these places. I'm mostly on Instagram. I don't get on Facebook all that much, but I have a few videos up on YouTube. I can send a link to those as well. I have some things up there about group counseling too that are like questions that I ask teachers, or places to observe students, just a little bit more information about getting ready for groups. I can send that stuff to you guys as well. But thank you. And I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I hope the forms will be helpful when I send those out. If you do have any follow-up questions after this, please feel free to email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat because it's not on here. So whenever you get the link from me, it comes from a email address. I think it's Keri@counselorkeri.com. I, for some reason, don't always get email responses there. Sometimes, especially if it's from a school email, they get filtered out into spam. So you can always reach me at Gmail. That's the easiest way. It's just counselorkeri@gmail.com. So please feel free to send me any questions that you have about the course, about the webinar, anything like that, over at Gmail. But that is the end of the webinar. You guys are welcome to stay and put questions in the chat box if you want to. Welcome to head out as well. And this will be recorded if you want to see any part of it again. I'll send out the link as well. But thank you guys so much. And I hope that you have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. I'll see you later. I will stay here just a moment to look at the chat box, but you guys are free to head out and enjoy your weekend.